All right. So yeah, I mean, if you can hear me already, drop a message in the chat so that we can just proceed to talking about what we are here to discuss. Just drop a message in the chat. Please drop a message in your community as well, so we can have others join. Drop a message in your community, in your room, and also drop a message in the general channel. Thank you. All right, I can see your messages. Okay, let's get started. Oh, hi, Ella. Hello, Ella.
Yeah,
Can you hear
hello,
me?
Mal.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. So I'll be kicking off already. I think we're good to go.
Yeah, we're good to go. So more people will be joining.
All right, all right, all right. Okay. Okay, so while I go ahead to explain, please, if you have any question, feel free to drop your questions in the chat because I am looking at the chat. Okay, so we're going to be covering we're going to be talking about Node, right? Node.js, and we're going to cover how to basically work with the Node.js file systems and as well as work with the command line arguments in Node.js, right? So I'm going to dive straight into writing code. While I'm coding, I would also do some basic explanation. So what I have done here is I created a simple, I basically created a directory called class right here. And I have a single JavaScript file. So I'm going to write my code here. So just to make sure everything works, console log hello world. So we can test that with node main.js. Okay, so that works. Now I believe you have used Node.js. In case you have not used Node.js, maybe you have not tried it. I would definitely recommend that you install it on your laptop and also or your desktop computer and go ahead to test out how to work with the Node.js engine. So I mean it's quite straightforward. I think we have a class covering that already. We also have a blog post. You can check out that blog post. And of course, if you check your Discord server, we already dropped the content for this class, right? So you can actually follow through with that content. So Node.js is basically wrapping the V8 engine JavaScript, right? So it lets you write code outside of the browser. Ideally, you can only write code within the browser, but now we are able to execute this JavaScript code outside of our browser, basically using Node, right? Which is what you're seeing here. Okay, so I'm not going to cover, installation of Node because we've done that before, right? And I also outlined how you can install Node on the blog post. So if you're using a Linux machine or you're using a Windows machine, there's a step-by-step, guide on how to set up, Node on your machine. Okay, so let's simply just talk about one thing. I really want you to first understand is what we call the REPL, right here. So what you're seeing here is called the REPL, right? So it's basically a read event print loop, right? And what happens here is you can actually execute Node.js code or JavaScript code right from the terminal within the REPL. So it's kind of like a continuous loop. You can put in your code here, it can execute that code, and it asks you to put in the next code if you have more or command. So for example, if I say console.log hello world, just like this, you see we actually have that hello world printed right here. Okay, so and of course it's asking us to proceed with the next to issue the next line of code or command, right? I'm going to quit this REPL by simply using the .exit command. So the .exit command takes us out of the REPL, right? Let us clear this using the clear command, and that is because I'm using a MacBook. So if you're using a Windows machine, probably there will be a different command for that. So you can check out. You can actually ask the Monabot, or you can actually just Google that. All right. So talking about the file system, let me check if there's any message. Okay. Okay. So talking about the file system, we're basically going to look at how we can read from a file, or write or write to a file, or even how we can delete a file basically from the terminal here. And finally, how we can also create directories. We're going to be using the default file system module within Node, right? So I want you to understand that it is very possible to use, Node has a bunch of default modules that you can actually use to do, amazing stuff. So for example, one of that module is the file module, right? The file system module. So if I say const fs and I say require fs, so what we've done right now is, well, we just actually imported the file system module, which is fs, right? And of course, we can proceed to use this particular file system module to read a specific file. So let's assume we have a file. Let's call this yeah. Let's just follow the example.txt. The example.txt. Okay, so now you see we have hello world within the example.txt file just here. This is just a simple txt file. Okay, so a txt file basically means text. All right, this is a text file. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to say I'm going to use fs.read file, and I'm basically going to point to the specific file. You see, while I'm coding, is giving me code completion, telling me what is expected, right? So it's actually expecting the file path, right? And of course, we have this file in the root, so we can simply just call this example.txt, and we can also go ahead to put the file format. So you can actually specify the file format. In this case, our format is going to be the standard UTF-8. UTF-8. This should be a comma. All right. And we can also put our callback. If we have an error, we'll have the error callback. If it's a success, if it's successful, we'll have the data as a response. Right. So let me expand this a little bit. Yeah, so you can see this even better. Okay, so now that we have this simple, file system read file function that we are calling here, the next thing we're going to do is to basically just check, if we have an error at any point in time, we're saying show that error, right? And I would explain what this is. I mean, yeah, but if it's successful, then we just need to console.log the data. What you are seeing here now is that we're basically checking because sometimes it's possible that probably the file does not exist, right? You don't want your code to crash. Instead, you want to throw an error. Now, the benefit of throwing this error is that it's basically going to proceed. It's basically going to proceed, to move that error down to your catch block. So let's assume we have like a catch block. If you know of try and catch try and catch block. So you basically have something like this. So you can actually try a bunch of code, and if everything works fine, you can actually print, or return that particular block of code. So let's just call this block of code. So let's just say equals AA, and if everything works fine, we can return block of code. But if there's an error, then we can actually print the error, right? So if you're using the throw statement here, and you have this particular block of code wrapped inside the try and catch block, when something goes wrong, it's going to pass that error automatically into the catch block, and then you can print the error, right? So that you can identify what the problem is. Okay, so that's the purpose of this. We're not really looking at that, but just to make you understand why we prefer to throw the error. Of course, you can also decide to print the error, right? You can of course do that. You can choose to print the error if you
Okay,
have an
hello,
error.
Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you see my screen?
Okay, so yeah, yes, but it's Steve. So that's what you're doing. So a lot of people are making comments that they can't see what you're doing. So your screen is frozen, I think. So
Oh,
I don't know if you
okay.
can see. Yes.
Give me 1 minute to check that. 1 minute, please. So let me just stop the screen share and share again. Please let me know if you can see it now. I have to bring back some of the previous, codes I removed. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so I mean that's funny because on my end, I'm actually looking at the screen and everything is moving. So I was surprised. Please, where did I stop? Let me know.
Okay,
Let me
Map,
know.
sorry, please. I don't know if you can just take it again because someone is saying that it's for 3 minutes, although it's not for
Wow.
3 minutes. So please, thank you.
Yeah. That's fine. That's fine. So I'm going to explain everything again from scratch, and I'm going to repeat most of these things. So yeah, let's take it again. So please, if it's frozen at any point in time, just let us know. But I doubt if that would repeat itself. Probably some network issues from my end. So if you can see my screen now, let's start afresh. So what we are trying to do, right? We basically created this text file and we added some text in here, hello world, right? It can be anything. It can be I am a software engineer, okay? And we basically want to read the content of that file within our code. We want to read it from our code, right? From our JavaScript code. So we are using the file system module, right? It's a default it's a default module that comes with Node, right? So basically, the file system module would be used to read files, create directories, basically perform those kind of file related operations. Okay. Uh, yeah. So let me zoom in on the screen again. Okay. So we're going to start off by importing the module, right? Which I said the file system. So I'm going to use the const fs, and I'm basically going to require the fs. The FS module. So I currently have the FS module, and we can make use of that FS module to read the file, right? So in order to do that, we need to call the fs.read file. That is what directory. We don't need to, look at the example.txt, right? And I'm going to also add the format, the default format. This is, the default format I'm using for now, UTF-8. And um, we are then going to have a callback, for error and data if it's successful. So if we have a successful read, we're going to print out data. If an error occurs during the process of reading this file, say for example the file does not exist, then you're going to basically have the error as the callback. All right, so I'm going to first check, if there's an error, right? If at any point we have an error, we want to either console.log the error, which of course you can do. But the problem with this is if you use console.log, it means it's going to go ahead and execute the other blocks of code you have here. So I mean, in a very realistic sense, when there's an error, you basically probably some other items will be dependent on that file, and you don't want to proceed. So the best thing you might want to do is to throw the error, right? It's up to you. It's up to your specific use case. For now, we're going to throw that error, and I would explain why I think it's actually better, to throw errors instead of just, printing them down without using them for anything. It's actually better to throw errors. Um, Throwing the error does not mean, it does not mean you're creating error. So the error was already created because, of course, something was missing, using our code as an example. And when you throw that error, you probably have to wrap this inside a try catch block so that the catch block would now, let us know that something, an error occurred or something happened that was not meant to happen. And then we would actually, manage that error properly. So I would show you how we can, proceed to fix that. Yeah, but we're throwing the error for now, and if everything is fine, if there's no error, it means this line will not be, called. And if everything is fine, it means we just want to console.log the data. We want to print out that data to the screen, right, or to our standard input, our standard output, section here in the terminal. So if I go ahead to run this with Node and main, you see it actually printed out I am a software engineer, right? So because everything went well. So what if you see I currently have example1. So I renamed the file to example1, meaning when I try this, the file does not exist. And now you can see at throw error, the code actually halted at this particular point. And of course, it actually threw that error. What you just have to do now is, ask yourself, how do I catch this error? So when our code throws that error, we want to be able to capture this error and probably work with it, or do some other things. So now I was only giving an example, while I was explaining earlier, that it is possible to use the try catch block, right? So you can use the try catch block, right, to capture that error. So we can actually move everything we have in here into the try block, right? So we're asking our code to try this. If something is wrong at some point, we want to basically, of course, throw the error, and then we want to capture the error. For now, I'm just going to, log that error to the terminal. So if we go ahead to do that, you're going to see that. Let's see. So it says error. No such directory was found. Okay, I'm going to try something else. Wrap this as a proper error, and then try this. Okay, so now we actually get that error, printed out. So it says error ENENT. Of course, this is a file system thing. It says no such file or directory, which means it cannot find example1. It cannot find example because we of course changed it to example1. If I change this to example1 right now, you see it works perfectly. Okay, so we're able to actually throw that error and of course do what we want to do with that error by catching it in the catch block. Let's go back once again, and 1 minute. So I'm trying to do this on the shift tab. Okay, shift tab. Okay, so this is basically how you would read a file using the FS module. So let's just do some proper commenting here. Right. So if you have any question regarding this, just ask a question before I proceed to the next thing, which is of course to write a file. So I'm going to basically write some data to the file, right? So I want to write some data to the file next. So please ask your questions if you have any question. Let me take a look at the. Okay, so please, you're so fast. How do we learn? I mean, the video is always available, and you don't want us to spend 2 hours here, of course. I believe you don't want us to spend 2 hours here. So I'll try to slow down, but frozen again. Yeah, please let me know on the chat if you can see my screen so I can proceed. So let me know on the chat if you can see my screen so I can proceed. Speaking about the speed, this content. So someone is asking, does the arrangement matter? The error data. Yeah. So when you're working with this callback, of course, you need to understand that this is the way it was actually built in. So just to give you the context here. So take a look at this. You see, it's a callback, and the first thing it's expecting here is the error, right? So I actually deleted it so you can see this. I'm sure you can see this, Samson. So you can see it's a callback, and the first thing it's expecting here is an error. And of course, if there's no error, then it's null, right? So we can choose to take off that error and only use data, right? But if you want to capture the error, then you have to basically identify that yes, I want to capture the error, which is a Node.js exception. Okay, so someone is also asking, someone said proceed. Okay, someone who is that? The mystical coder said, what does the UTF-8 do? All right, so UTF-8 is basically a standard, right? When you're looking at basically it's a Unicode transformation format. So it's a standard showing that what we are accepting or what we are reading is basically a text format, right? So UTF-8 is basically showing that it's a length of characters that we're expecting to grab from that file. So we have different standards. We can't talk about that right now, but of course we have different standards when it comes to defining character encoding. right? So I think it's a more advanced thing if I decide to dive into that. But you know, you can ask me on Discord, and I would you know, do some explanation. But of course, you can also, you know, do some search around that. This is just you know, stating that we are reading text, you know, text characters, basically, right? From a very foundation. So from a very foundational angle. So someone is saying, please, is the first class on Node.js? Is this the first class on Node? No, this is not the first class on Node.js. Please check the Discord server, check the resource channel. We have other materials there. This is not the first class on Node.js. All right, so I think we can proceed. Thank you. Yeah, so the next thing we're going to do is um, to write some texts to the file, right? We're going to work with the same file, so and we're basically going to overwrite the data there. So we're going to work with the same file. Let's just go ahead and do that. So in order to write to the file, we are going to now use a write file, right? So if you look at this, we used a read file. This time around, we're going to use fs.write file, right? And you know, of course, we're still going to follow the same pattern. So it's not. I can simply do copy and paste here, and I can edit this. You know, this is write file. As you can see, you know, it also, you know, tells you it also gives you some explanation. So about the write file method. So of course you can read through, and yeah, we're going to write to this specific file as well. The data we're going to be writing into this file, we have to pass that next. So we're going to pass that next. So I can just use a random text. So of course I can say um, I am currently on streams. So streams in you know, Node.js. So this is just a different text. I am currently focusing on streams, and of course you have your file from your file, you know, your formats as well. And you know, in case something goes wrong, I think I removed something here. Please, I'm going to add this back. So this was when I was, you know, explaining something here. I took it off. So I'm going to also put the error here. You know, we are writing to the file, so we're not really expecting like, you know, a data out. But what we are expecting is, you know, an error might occur, right? An error might occur because, you know, the file, of course, might not exist. Okay, so of course we still have to check this again. We can say, you know, if there's an error, you know, just show that error, you know, just to let us know what, you know, really happened. Okay, and at the end of the day, just tell us, you know, if it was saved or not. So if there was no error, it means we're going to get to this line, which would say the data was saved. So let's do some commenting here. So, you know, by the time I share this with you, you can also, you know, understand this better. So if there was no error, um, right? Okay, yeah, prints out this response or something. Yeah, response. Okay, so here I'm going to say throw an error if there was one. All right. So and you know, same thing here. If there was no error, you know, we're going to print out that data, right? So print out the data in the file. Okay. And if there was an error, then of course throw that error. So let's also do this. Okay, so I think this is much better. Of course, you know, the comments are, you know, looking much, but I think it will help you understand what is going on here. So this is what we're going to do. We're basically going to run this. It's a good idea that, you know, you actually comment out some of these things. I would usually advise you, you know, wrap your code within a function so that you can choose the function to call and, you know, the function not to call. So what I mean is if I run this, it's basically going to execute this and also execute this, right? So you probably don't want that to happen all the time. So you might choose to wrap this inside the function, just like this, okay? And you can also wrap this in another function called write file. So let's just call function write file. I'm doing this because I want to manage the execution, of course. So I'm sure you understand what I mean. So in order to call the write file now, I just have to call write file. Okay. So if I run this from my terminal, let's clear the terminal first. Yeah. So if I run this with node main.js, So it says the data was saved, which means our expectation is that this would have changed, of course. So you see it has changed to I am currently focusing on streams, right? So that is, that is how you write a file, how you write a text to a file, okay, using the file system module. All right. So if this is your first class and you are confused, at what we are doing right now, please, take your time to also check out the previous classes. But all the classes are recorded and they are saved on YouTube. And we also write blog posts with details on everything that was taught in the class alongside the video material. Okay. So just take your time, read through the blog, and you will definitely understand this. I can assure you that. Okay, so after looking at the write file command, the next command we're going to be looking at right now would be how to delete files, right? So we're going to say deleting files using the fs module. All right. So now we're going to be deleting, files using the fs module. In order to kick off with this, let's start off by creating the function because we want to wrap this around the function. Okay. So I want to wrap this, with a function. So function deletes file. Spell that correctly. Okay. Delete file. All right. So within this function now, we are basically going to, use the fs, which is a file system, of course, dot onLink. So that is what you use when you want to remove a specific file, So you use onLink, okay? So if I say fs.onLink, I am then going to put, the name of that file again. So example dot text. Probably I'll just create a different file. I'll call this file to delete, right? .txt. So I have a file there, file to delete.txt, an empty file, but we want to delete the file. So let's call a file to delete. Is that correct? Yeah. So file to delete.txt. And of course, if there's an error, tell us that there's an error. So that's why we're working with this. So if an error occurs, we'll be able to, tell that there was an error. And yeah, we're going to use the same line of code again. So if there was an error, just throw that error. Okay, and console.log, just to tell us that the file was deleted. So let's say file was deleted. All right. So if there was an error, we throw that that error. Right. So if there was an error, we throw that error on this line, and if it was successful, if the operation successful, show this message. Okay. So if the operation was successful, then show this message. All right. So now we can proceed to call the function. Now, the amazing thing about working with functions, of course, you have been taught how to write functions. Is the fact that you can actually pass in, parameters or arguments. So as you can see, if I put in file, I can also change this, right? I can change this to file. It means I can reuse this. At any point in time, I can call this and pass the file, right? Remember, it's a txt, so I can call this twice and even pass in multiple files, right? So I can even create a new file. It can be a PNG file. It will definitely take it off. It can be a video file. It will take it off, okay? So, yeah, I mean, we're not going to do this because I want you to, have access to this code and you can choose to, dynamically, change things up. But for now, we are basically going to stick to, just having the file hard coded in here. Yeah, so let's go ahead and run this, and let's see if the file to delete.txt would be deleted. Okay, so if I run this now, of course, you see file was deleted and the file was also deleted from, our Explorer right here. Okay, so this is how you would delete a file using the fs module. So let me check the chat if you have any question. What if you need to write a longer sentence? How do we do that? Of course, I mean, okay, so I think there was a previous question here. Can we write the content in a variable and pass the value? Oh, yeah, sure. Let's do that. So I think now you're referring to the write file. The question is pointing at this. You can make this dynamic, okay? So you can always just from the example I gave you now. So this is the file. Of course, we also have like the text. So if you want to call it text, so let's take this off and let's call this the text. So we can basically call this now, this is the write file. So we can call write file, and we can actually pass in the file, which is example.txt. As a matter of fact, you can even pass this, in some variable. So we can say file name equals example.txt, and what do I call this text, right? Okay, so the text would be maybe a bunch of text, just like this. So I can say, hello world, um, my name is Marv, I am an engineer at Top Universe. Okay, so, all right, why don't I just, yeah, let's do this. Okay, so I am a founder. Okay, so I am the founder at Top Universe. So you can write, you can even write longer text. And now we're basically going to pass the value in here because of course we expect that parameter as well. So I can pass in text and I can change this to the file name. Okay, just like this. So you see we have the write. We're writing to the file name and we're also writing this value. Let's execute this to see if that works. Right, so it says the data was saved, which means we can check that. And as you can see, we have the data right here. Okay, so I hope this answered your question, Zedik. I'll just leave this. Yeah, I think I can just take this off. I want to make sure we, optimize the space. So let's just comment this out. Okay, so and I'm also sure you understood the explanation on how we delete the files, right? So someone is also asking, what if you need to write a longer? Yeah, so I think I also explained that. All right, so the next thing we're going to do right now is to use the FS module to create directories, okay? So to create folders, yeah, that's what you call it on Windows, to create directories or folders. So we're going to do that right now. I'm going to call this function creates directories, okay? So directories. And we are going to basically use, it's a similar code base, so but this time around it's mkdir. So as you can see, we have a ton of, functions here. If you're building applications that will communicate with, the operating system, there's so many things. If the file system module is actually, it actually has like a lot of, methods you could play around with, right? You see, we have a lot of them. And yeah, so if you're building desktop applications, using Electron, of course, you would definitely use the file system module a lot, right? If you are also building web applications, yeah, at some point you want to delete some files from some folders, or maybe you want to delete like images when a user deletes their account. In a production environment, you might use a different technique if you're using like a third-party software. But if you have your files inside your application directory, which is not something you should do in production, but if you do that, you can actually use the file system to take them off. Right. So we are basically going to create a directory right now using mkdir, which is, of course, the Unix command for creating directories. So I am going to pass in the name of the directory I want to create right here. I want to make that dynamic. And next, we're going to check if we have an error, right? So if we have an error, we're basically going to say if there was an error, just like we did before, throw the error. But of course, if there was no error, just let us know that the directory was created. Okay, so in order to make this dynamic, let's just call this the directory name. This is not the best, so let's say directory name. Directory name. So directory name, of course, meaning folder name. So if I call this create directories, and I give this a name of Mav, it's going to create a directory called Mav. Of course, we can try that, out. Let's see if it works. So it says directory was created, and as you can see, we have the Mav folder created. Okay, yeah. So this works as expected. So yeah, I think this is yeah, I think this is fine. This works as expected. So if you have any question, let me just add a very basic comment as well. This is repetition, but I think it's needed. So yeah, there's an error, so that error. Okay, so we can of course even create more, right? You can choose to pass in like an array of directories, right? If you want to create multiple directories, you can create. I'll use some names, from the chat. So let's see. Yeah, so it's similar to using, some command prompt. So the file system module, of course, as I explained earlier, some of the commands you're using is basically your bash or your terminal. If you're using Unix, of course, some of the commands you can use from a Unix terminal. So if or from a Unix shell, if that is better. So if I actually have like Mav, I have like, let's say Solomon, and I also have MDs. Okay, so we have these three names, Map Solomon MDs. Let's correct this. Okay, so if you want to create multiple directories, of course, you can delete this first. And, in here, we can actually choose to, pick. So we can actually say for I in directory name. And this is me almost writing Python here. So let's not let's not do that. So I'm going to say directory name dot for each, right? So let's say directory name dot for each. So we have the element, which is basically going to be the file name there. And let's just try out this. Let's try this to see if we can, capture those names. So I'm going to say elements, right? So let's comment this out for now. We're not using an object, but this is an array, right? So just to see if that works, you see we have Mav, Solomon, and Endis, which means, we can actually use the loop, and then we can pass the item in here and call this element. So this is just using a very simple, for each loop. So we're going to, iterate over the data coming in from directory names, which is a bunch of names, right? And we're going to create directories for each name. So if I run this again now, you see we have MDs was created. Of course, we have Mav, we have Solomon, right? So let me see. Someone is saying, what is the difference between logging the error on the console and throwing it? Oh yeah, so I was giving that example to say when you're building an application, when you log, it will proceed to executing the next line. So just let's take a look at the simple example we have here. So if I choose to log this, and I think that question was from Ife Sinachi and Arrow. If I choose to log this, it's going to then proceed to also print this. And of course, there was no data. So this is going to print basically nothing, right? So I'm going to try this now. So let's copy this and let's basically create a simple example. Let's comment this out so it won't try to create this again. So let's try to create a file. And, this file does not exist, okay? And we decide to log console.log, the error. So if we decide to log, let's take a look at what happens here. So I need to run this, of course, read file, correct? Okay, so if I run this, now what you're going to see here is, of course, you have that error, right? And now it shows that error, but then it says undefined. Undefined because it was also trying to execute this line, right? It was trying to execute this line and it was trying to print data. So imagine if you're building a real application and every other thing is dependent on this, and or every other thing is dependent on the previous items, and you decided to just console.log that error. In fact, you should not console.log error in a production level application. Okay, don't do that. Instead, make sure you stick to true, because if I throw this error right now, let's throw that error. That is throw, not throw. So let's throw the error. If I throw this error and I run this again, so now you see we have that error, but it did not proceed to print, this item, right? It did not proceed to print the item, which I think is the most important part here, because it got to this point, it noticed there was an error and it basically terminated the program there, and also told you that of course there's an error, you have to fix it. You get my point? Ife Sinachi, do you understand that? Okay, so yeah, do we have any other question here? All right, so I think I can proceed. Let me know in the chat if I can proceed. Please drop a message. Let's be fast with that. Let me know if I can proceed because I want us to move straight to talking about command line arguments. All right, good, good, good. Okay, so let's comment this out for now. So basically, we have the FS module. Of course, there are multiple things you can do that I have not stated here because there are a lot of things. What I want you to understand from this session is to understand that we have a lot of default modules from Node that you can actually use to build robust applications. While I was learning how to use Node, years back, I think one of the major things I did was ensure that I learned how to use Node itself. Okay, not necessarily frameworks and plugins, but using Node itself to build a lot of things. I mean, then you see the possibilities with Node. So when you start seeing frameworks doing different things, you already understand what is happening behind the scene. Okay, so I think someone asked a question. Zedik, you're saying, can you please go over the folder creation again? So if you can see my screen before I proceed, I'll just quickly take that. To create a folder, this is what we're using here, which is the make directory command, right? And I would also advise you guys, backend engineers, if I am to recommend an operating system for you, I would say go with Linux. You can choose Ubuntu or Mint OS because it's similar to your Windows experience already, so it won't be so difficult for you, so that you can actually learn how to do all these stuff. Okay, you would learn all these commands because you would have fun using commands all the time. I always have fun, doing stuff with the command line. It's actually faster, right? It's actually faster. When you start using it, you will discover that it's actually faster. So what I did here was I wanted to create a single file, but I then decided to create multiple directories, right? And I passed the value of the directory names basically into an array, right? So you see I have three names. It can be 4, it can be 100. And I basically called the function passing in this array. So what I simply did here was I said the directory name dot for each, which is going to iterate over the items within the directory name. So this is more like an iterable, right? It's an iterable, and I can actually go through every single item within because it's an array, right? So I can go through every single item. So it will get to the first item, which is Mav, and it would actually, make the directory Mav. Then it will get to the second item, which is Solomon. It will make the directory Solomon. And it will get to the third item, MDs, and it would make that directory MDs. Okay. So someone is saying, can we do it on Windows? Yeah, you can because Node.js has that it's already wrapping that functionality, so it would definitely make it work, right? But that would definitely work outside the fact that I'm also recommending you play around with Linux. That would work. Okay, all right, so yeah, let's proceed to the next. Comment this out. So I'm going to create a new JavaScript file. I would call this cmdargs.js, right? And just to have that on the terminal as well, let's reset our terminal and let's call the node cmdargs.js. So of course we don't have anything in here, so it's empty. What we're going to do now is we are simply going to, we're going to basically, try to see the command line arguments when we basically, execute um, something from terminal. So I'm going to show you an example of how that would work, right? So this is what I mean. If I call the node cmdargs and I also call maybe I call like help or something, I am going to simply say const args equals process. This is process dot argv, right here, argv, which is representing the argument. And let's grab everything from here. It's going to give us an object, right? So let's just try to grab everything from here. I'm going to console.log args. Okay, so let's see what we have. Right. So as you can see, it's giving us, a bunch of arguments, including the argument I passed, which was the help, right? So you notice that what I called was help. If I take off the help, it's basically giving me, the name of the file, and of course the fact that, if this file is executing with a node, right? So you see the detail from node, right? So it was able to bring in, because I'm using NVM, for my node, I'm using a specific version from NVM. So it gave us all the necessary details relating to, the command line, arguments, relating to those arguments. If I also pass in a name like Mav, right? You see, it's going to also give us Mav. Yeah, so you can actually, fetch some of these records. You can actually slice away some of the records as well. And the reason why you would always want to slice away the first two records is because the first record is always going to be the Node.js executable, and the second argument would be the file itself. So this is what I mean. We can always slice away the first two parameters just like this. Let's run this again. And now you are left with math, because you know that the first item is going to be the Node.js executable and the second item will be the file. So we are left with math, okay? You can always do this. And this is basically how you see a bunch of applications work, even down to, running npm init, right? Or maybe we can also choose to create like a command line application. We can call this, let's say, a CMD args. So we can actually use some kind of, so we can say if this person passed in print, we want to execute, print. If this person passed in, if this person passed in a specific argument like, hello world, we want to grab the hello world and probably pass it into a function. So I'm going to show you a couple of other things, but let's just do something, very simple here. If I create a simple function called print arguments, right? And within the print argument, I basically want to pass in what I collected, from here. Okay, so I'm going to pass in the args right here, but I'm going to instead say print arguments, right? Print arguments. Okay, I'm going to pass in the args. All right, so when I pass in the args, I'm then going to return the args. So this is quite simple. Of course, we're going to achieve the same thing at the end of the day, but we want to play around with this in the function. Okay, if you want to play around with this, you can basically grab the first item, which is going to take off the hello world from the from the array, because we are collecting the first item in the first index, which is 0. That's the first index. So now I can assume that this is kind of like a greeting, right? So let's say let greeting equals this, and I can simply return, hello, probably some sort of name. Yeah, do this. Oh, come on, Mav. Okay, so let's use this. So I can say hello name. So we don't have that name yet, but we're going to grab that name from the argument as well. So we're going to grab the name first and then the greeting next. Okay, so if this is what we have, we're saying hello name, then followed by the greeting. Okay, so let's simply pass in the greeting. So this is we're just working with a string literal. So we're basically going to return hello, then the name, and also the greeting. So our assumption here is that the greeting can be good morning, and the name can be probably my name. So let's just say Mav. Right, so we have two two items here, and we're basically just going to try this to see if it works, right? So if I call this, it says hello Mav, good morning. Okay, that's the output, right? So looking at what is happening here, this is statically typed, not very good, because we're not accepting things dynamically, but I believe you get the point, and you can actually play around with the possibilities, right, of what you can do from the command line. There are so many other libraries that can even aid you create even better applications that will run on command line. There are so many libraries out there. We're not covering libraries today, so I'm not going to mention any. Yeah, but I believe we'll cover libraries in the evening. So yeah, we'll definitely have fun doing that. So the major thing I want you to look at is the fact that using the process.argv, you can basically grab all the arguments, and of course you can do whatever it is you want to do with the arguments, so long you understand the the positions. you can of course make it flexible enough to create command line applications. All right. So yeah, and that is basically how to collect the items from the command line, um, which is fun. So if you have any question around that, please go ahead, raise your questions. I'll take your questions right now. While I'm waiting for your questions, I'm just going to probably build something extra from here. So let's assume we are going to let's try to do something more realistic than just greeting. So let's say we are always going to pass in like maybe a bunch of JSON objects. So a JSON object is actually a way to. So it's called a JavaScript object notation. So it's basically a way to describe items, especially used when working or when building APIs, right? So of course by default you can't actually write a correct JSON in here. It's going to look like an object instead, right? But I want to show you something. So let's assume we are able to pass a JSON. So this is a JSON. Marvelous Solomon. Let's put his full name. Okay, so we have this JSON object, just like this. If you want to convert this um, into a JSON, you will probably say const JSON object. So I'm sure you have learned how to work with objects, right? But for now, this is just assumed to be a string. So it is possible to say JSON.pass, right? Let's see. Okay, so I want to console.log this, if that would work. So let's console.log this and let's take off. Let's comment out some of these items. So just to see if this is going to be valid code, node cmd args. All right. So what happens here is we're able to convert a JSON, which is stringified, and we're able to convert it into an object, right? So the idea is it possible to paste this particular link that you're seeing right here, this particular string, which can be even more, right? Is it possible to paste this into the terminal and have our command line application convert the string convert the string to an object, or even convert an object into a JSON string, right? What's the possibility of doing that? We still have a few minutes. If you have any question, drop it in the chat. Yeah, if you have any questions, drop it in the chat. Okay, so let's quickly do that, and yeah, I might be a little bit fast, so let's just do that. Now we're going to assume we have two use cases here. The first one is to convert the first one is to convert the either convert the JSON, so JSON to string, which is JTS, or string, yeah, JSON to object, JTO, or objects to JSON or OTJ. So I mean, this is not the best way to name some of these things, but these are going to be our arguments. The way we identify the operation we're trying to carry out. Okay, you can structure this with a class, whatever it is you want to use, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to have two functions that can do this. I can do that in a single function using if else. I would always advise you start off with those pattern, brute force your way in. When you're done with that, always do some refactoring. So if I'm to brute force my way in here, I'm basically going to have a single operation. Let's call this operation, function operation, right? So the name of our function is operation, of course. Now we have these two objects, which is JTO and of course OTJ. So I'm going to basically say, we are going to accept arguments. So we're going to accept the arguments. And remember, we are basically going to take off the, first, we're going to slice the arguments that we get from here. So let's say we have arguments, we slice away the first two items. So this is going to be const arguments, right? Just like this. Pulse process.args, okay? This makes sense, right? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to check what exactly is this person trying to perform. Is it the JTO, which is JSON to object? The person would specify, right? So we can say if the specific argument, which is of course going to be 0. It's a good idea that we even strip off the item here, right? So we can actually strip off that item first, just to make sure everything works fine. I mean, even with the item, it doesn't matter, but let's strip it off. So I am going to say, strip off that item. Let's call this command. So what command are we expecting, right? So we're going to strip this off. We're going to say dot strip or dot. I think it's yeah. So let's see. If I can remember how to do this in JavaScript. So yeah, we can use the replace. Yeah, so it's called yeah, we can use dot replace. Let's first convert this into a string. Can we do that? Can we do that like this? I hope I'm not carried away with Python code. So please give me 1 minute. Convert to string in JS. All right, so I think I am being, yeah, of course, to string. That is what we should have. That is what we should have. Right. Okay, so let's do to string. Right. So I'm going to basically just console.log command. All right, so just to see what we have here, we're going to pass this in. So let's call that. Let's take this off as well. So let's basically call this file that is called operations, right? And we are passing in that args, right? So we're passing in args. So at the end of the day, we want to basically pass in the entire args just like this. Great. So if we pass in the args, we're going to see the specific command on argument 0. So let's call node cmd args. I'm going to pass in, the first option there is JTO, right? So at the end of the day, we're going to know if, all right, so we have an error. It says JTO was not defined. Let's see, where did that error come from? So it says JTO was not defined. Oh, right here. Okay, so we forgot to remove that. That was the error. Let's call that again. So now you see we have JTO. We've converted it to string. What if we decide to call the dot replace, right? And we can replace this sign with an empty string. Yeah, I think this should work, right? So now we see we have the JTO without the hyphen, right? So we're able to have the JTO without the hyphen. The next thing we're going to do now is to play around with this. So we're going to say if I don't take that off yet. So if the command is equals JTO, right? That's a very simple if statement. We can also say else right here. Else if command equals OTJ. Okay. All right. So now we have the two operations. So if it's JTO, what do we want to do? If it's JTO, it means we're expecting a JSON, right? And if you get a JSON, you definitely want to convert that JSON into an object. Of course, JSON to object, right? So we can actually say JSON.pass. The value there. Remember, you need to also point out that you have the value coming from args1, right? So now we're going to pass this, value. So we're passing the value, which means we're going to get an object. So we can say object value, and then we can return the object value. Now that is if we use JTO, right? What if we actually pass an object and we want to get back a string? Then we have to do the stringify, right? We have to stringify the value because we want to get back a string, and we have to return, let's call this the JSON value. So this is a very simple example, and of course you want to refactor this and make it even better. Don't write. This is not a good way to write code. This is a way to brute force your way and make sure you have something working. But long term, it's actually better to make sure this is flexible enough, and you are able to just structure this into functional units. Every function should perform a specific thing. In my own view, that is the way I think you should write code. But yeah, you can always start from this. If I call this code again right now and I pass in a stringified, because we're using JTO, JSON to object. So if I pass in a stringified object like this is a valid JSON I'm writing now. So marvelous. Okay, what am I missing here? So close this up. So if I stringify this, so we have an error. So it says there's an error in this JSON I just wrote. So let's try to figure out what the error is. Yeah, so this is not a valid JSON because it says undefined. So unexpected token. Okay? Let's verify to see what came in. So I want to verify with the value right here. Okay, so let's run that again. Okay, so of course it says undefined, and I think it's probably because I passed in this item. This is not the way you would pass in that valid JSON. Let's actually try the second option to see what it would look like. So if I do this and I say OTJ, of course you see we have something valid right now. But the problem with this is because is that what we passed in here, we said JSON.pass, and we are passing in that value. I think in order to get a valid JSON, we can actually do this. Let's say JSON. Let me grab this, right? Dot stringify. Hopefully this was what we want. JSON. Oh yeah, we have to console.log that. Console.log. So run that again. Okay, so this is all we have. Let's pick that up. Try the previous example again. This is still not going to give us the valid JSON we expect. Of course, as expected. So this JSON is actually invalid. That is why we're having this error. So it says the unexpected token. Yeah, because the JSON is actually invalid. But so someone is asking where all the screws went. Installing Nodejs is like trying to assemble IKEA furniture. I think that's just a joke or something. Okay, so please, is it possible to create another directory inside the new directories using FS module? Can we create directories outside the working directory using FS module inside? Yeah, of course you can. So if you have the right permission or you're able to set the right permission, as I said earlier, when you're building desktop applications, you'll definitely use the FS module a lot. So if you can set or give your application the right set of permissions, you can create files and directories anywhere on your machine based on the permission you have. Okay, and there are more advanced ways to also execute those commands. I think you of course, if you check the blog, I dropped a couple of resources you can use. So what we see here is that JSON.pass, when we pass in, when we're using JTO, we are unable to perform this specific operation. So instead, I'm going to try to just return this, just to be sure that this is actually a result of passing an invalid. Yeah, so is actually. So we need to actually stringify this, but not with this kind of, not with this pattern. Yeah, that is not going to work. There's a tool I would have used to do that. I'm not sharing my browser, but you can use a tool called JSON formatter. I'm very sure JSON formatter, or probably JSONify. So you can actually convert a specific item to the way it will be printed as JSON. So when you pass in that JSON here, you can then pass or convert that JSON by using JSON.pass. It will definitely transform that JSON into an object, right? Just like the previous example you saw that I gave that example using something like this. The problem is that I can't really pass in an object like that, straight into the terminal. It's not accepting it. But yeah, that's that's fine. So this is just a simple example to perform an operation like this. And when we tried the OTJ, we were able to grab that specific item and stringify it, and it gave us the response we were expecting. So which is OTJ. So we're able to pass this item, and then we have our response. All right. So if you have any other question, please go ahead drop it in the chat. So someone said that I disagree with you. Um, so JSON formatter is a browser extension. So I think when you say, are you referring to dev null? Let me see. Installing Node.js is like trying to assemble IKEA furniture after a night of heavy drinking. Man, that's funny. So it wasn't that hard though. Yeah, yeah, so JSON formatter is a browser extension. I don't know if it has a browser extension. I actually use the website, so it's JSONformatter.org. I use it a lot. We have a bunch of JSON tools out there. Drop a message, tag me on Discord, and I will probably share with you after this session. All right, so since we don't have any other question, we have passed 1 hour already. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you in the next class this evening. Right. Okay. Thanks. Remember to fill your attendance form. It is very important that you do that. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Okay, okay. So you said it has a browser extension. Okay, good. I don't really install most of those extensions, to avoid slowing down my browser. So I just, have a bunch of bookmarks. So have a wonderful day. I think you can also install some tools, some plugins on VS Code to help you with, some of those stuff. Bye, guys. I'll see you in the evening.